Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today's review is going to be of this little guy. This is the Hidizs S9 Pro mobile/OTG headphone DAC and amplifier. I should say DAC and headphone amplifier. Excuse me, little dongle DAC here. All right, this is a $109 US product. It was loaned to me by Hidizs for review. They have asked nothing in return other than a fair and honest evaluation and have made no attempt to influence my opinion in any particular direction. And so all of the thoughts you are about to hear on this are mine and mine alone. So let's go ahead and do shameless self-promotion, and then we'll come back and talk more about the Hidizs S9 Pro.
Hi, I'm Wave Theory's human companion, and he wants you to know that your support of this YouTube channel helps keep the reviews coming. If you enjoy Wave Theory's honest, thorough style, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the links in the description below to sign up for the Patreon or send him a tip through PayPal. All right, enjoy the musings.
Overhead view to do a unit tour. We'll look at the build here of the S9 Pro, and then we will also talk about specs, because this is the box that it ships in and the specs are written right on the back. So of note, we see that the digital to analog conversion chip in here is a Sabre. It's an ES9038Q2M right there. We also see DSD decoding up to DSD 512 and PCM decoding up to 32-bit 768 kilohertz. So it handles the vast majority of all things two-channel audio these days. I don't think there is MQA on here, but that doesn't really matter anymore anyway. Okay, rated power output here is 100 milliwatt per channel. Okay, right there at 32 ohms. You see from the single-ended output, and then 200 milliwatts per channel at 32 ohms from the balanced output. Best I can tell here from the specs on this box anyway. So there they are. Okay, let's look at the unit itself here real quick. Hold it up close. It is a shiny black plastic. So fingerprint magnet. You can see that or not, all and so forth. Yeah, but other than that, it is simple, it is sleek, it is the size of like a USB thumb drive slash flash drive, that kind of thing. On there we have a female type C USB port here on the input end, and then the outputs we have 3.5 millimeter single-ended and 2.5 millimeter TRRS balanced outputs here to plug in IEMs or headphones. That's really the unit itself right there. Notably absent from the physical build of this thing is any way to change the volume from the unit itself. It has no hardware or any kind of volume control on it on its own. To adjust the volume, you are completely reliant on whatever you have this plugged into and use the software volume control on that. That is my single biggest complaint about this unit, is that it has no actual volume control on it. You are limited to the software volume control. I will unpack why that's an issue as we progress further through the review. The accessories that come with this, fairly standard fare here in this box. Let me get them out here. Okay, I really didn't use this, but it's here if you want it. There's like a belt clip kind of a thing. Okay, just a little clip that this slides right into if you have any interest in that. Because of the female input, female USB port, they did throw in this very handy, very short little jumper USB cable that is directional. Like, it doesn't matter whether you plug in like this or like this on either end, but this end with the Hidizs marking on it here has to go into your source device for this to work. If you plug it in the other way around, nothing happens. All right, there's also this handy little USB Type A to Type C adapter here so that you can plug this into a computer or things of that nature. that have the more standard USB input. I tried that on my Surface Pro 4 laptop with this thing, worked just fine. All right, so the only other part of the build I would like to show you then is that this Hidizs logo right here is a light, okay? Glows green when it's plugged into and it has any kind of PCM signal to it, okay? I'm using my KN N6 Mark II DAC here. We're going to allow USB Audio Player Pro to control this device so that we get bit perfect output, okay? And so this is green when it gets a PCM file. Let me find something that I know is DSD here. Let's see, I didn't set this up, so hopefully this will work without difficulty. Yeah, dark side. Okay, this shouldn't get blocked because you won't hear it. When this plays a DSD file, come on. Oh, okay. Doesn't like it. I'm gonna have to go back and change that. Anyway, take my word for it that when DSD plays on this thing, that light turns yellow. Okay. Anyway, that's the unit tour. Those are the features and all of that. I will come back on camera here and we will talk about sound. As we transition to sound, let me talk about the test gear that I used to evaluate this little thing. And it actually has been here for a little bit and I've used several different things with it. So for sourcing, I mostly used either my Samsung Galaxy S22 Plus smartphone, which is actually doing the video of this right now. Using the little provided USB cable that came with this thing. And then I also, for some other critical listening tests, used the USB adapter and plugged it into my Microsoft Surface Pro 4 laptop / tablet kind of thing there. So on the smartphone, the source would have been mostly Rune Arc or Spotify to listen to music there. If I used Rune Arc, we're talking about lossless streams of either local DSD files or FLAC files or high-res FLAC files, either locally stored on my NUC Rune core or streamed from Qobuz. For the laptop, the Surface Pro 4, I mostly used Ottervana with this plugged in via USB, playing local FLAC or DSD files as well. All right, I used a fair amount of different kinds of IEMs and headphones on this guy here. IEMs that I at least checked for like noise floor issues and all of that would be pretty sensitive ones. The Fur M5, I think I plugged into these. This right here, and did not notice any noise floor or anything like that, so that was good. I did try the HiFiMan Svenar IEMs on here because those are harder to drive IEMs, and then the ones that I just reviewed, the Final A5000s, also got a trial on here as well. Both using the 3.5mm and the balanced output on this as well. For full-size headphones, which is where I think this gets a little bit more interesting, I tried a variety in there. I have Meze 109 Pro in. I tried that one. The Aurorus Borealis, I tried that. Over on my desk right now is the Kennerton, I believe it's pronounced Yallerhorn GH40. That's in for review. The Aurorus Australis is also here. That's hanging up over on my right, all that. So those are all full-size dynamic driver headphones that are fairly low in impedance and easy to drive. I also tried my Focal Radiance. And then I also tried a couple of what I think are like realistic headphones in terms of pricing, but are more difficult loads, just to see what kind of control this would have for slightly more challenging loads. I tried the HiFiMan Edition XS, which is like a medium efficiency planar magnetic headphone on here. And then I also tried the Massdrop plus Sennheiser HD6XX, which is a 300 ohm dynamic driver, so a high Z load there, just to see how all of that would do. And again, I used a combination of both the 3.5mm single-ended output and the balanced output. So let's talk about the sound then. What kind of sound did I hear listening through all of those devices? So Like a good number of entry-level pieces these days, like the overall sound signature here is really going for a lot of neutral. It is very much a trend where we're just going for a clean measuring and very neutral kind of sound at these for a lot of this entry-level gear. Yes, there are some exceptions out there, like i-fi, for example, that usually has a little bit of a colored sound, but this isn't really like that. This is going more for a neutral kind of presentation, and for the most part hits it. There is just a little bit of that ESS glare in the treble around in the consonant range. So there's just a little bit of sibilance that can come in there, sharp S's and T's, that kind of thing. Cymbal crashes can be just a little bit shimmery and tizzy every now and then. So, I mean, like at this price point, they didn't do the best job of reining in that little ESS hump in the treble, but it's not terrible. It doesn't get in the way all that often, even with some can be sharper headphones, like I just mentioned, like the Edition XS, for example, there. It still was much more controlled and clean in the treble than it wasn't, and I would have to listen to that very loudly for a fairly long period of time to really get fatigued by the sharp S's and T's, even though they are there. Okay. But what really impressed me the most about this thing from a sonic standpoint was how much control that it has. It's actually pretty potent and powerful for a little, a USB flash drive sized dongle DAC amp here. It really exhibited a lot of control over most of those full-size headphones that I just mentioned. Okay, so it has some pretty punchy and extended low end that is fairly well controlled and has reasonably good pitch definition and that sort of thing. And then it usually controls the treble pretty well, that outside of that just a little bit of ESS glare that often happens up top. But outside of that, the treble is pretty smooth and well controlled. To a level that is pretty impressive to me here for a device of this size. So other things like the soundstage, like it's okay. The soundstage never really stood out to me as being big or small, just kind of there. There is okay imaging there, like does a fairly good job of placing sounds, at least particularly laterally. Not a ton of depth, which is pretty common here at the entry level price point. Okay, but the lateral imaging is pretty good. Where it doesn't do great is with the separation of sonic images, but on the other hand, it's also, $110, and so that's not particularly unusual for pieces of that price either, particularly in this tiny little form factor here. The resolution is okay. I do think that you can get a little bit more resolution even at this price point if you get into some separates. Maybe a little bit more expensive, but I wasn't really blown away with the resolution here at this price, because I do think that I have heard like a slightly more textured bass, and like the overtones of electric bass guitars, like the finger action and all of that, you hear that slightly higher pitched tone of the transient of the finger pluck on the string, or that sort of thing. Like that didn't come through as clearly to me from this as I have heard from some other entry-level pieces, but it's also like in no way bad for the price either on there. So, I mean, coming back around here, like the thing that impressed me the most about this thing sonically was just how well it powered, moderately difficult to drive, easy to moderate difficult drive headphones. Like even that Edition XS, which is a large planar magnetic driver headphone, is a medium efficiency thing. It is a little bit power hungry and so forth, but this actually drove it pretty well. Gave it a lot of authority in the low end, some good slam, some good rumble, and all of that, decent control. And then like the treble could get a little sharp here and there, but it wasn't really not a problem. It does run out of gas with the HD6XX though. Like this just does not handle loads that are, say, over about 150 ohms or so. So the 300 ohm load of the 6XX was getting to be a bit too much for this. Now, some people are going to hear that and say, well, it gets really loud, and it does. It's not It's not a sound intensity problem with the 6XX. It's a control problem, because the 6XX, or the Sennheiser HD650, they're essentially the same thing. They have a reputation, partially fair, partially unfair, in my opinion, of being a little bit veiled. And that veil sounds a little bit more veiled to me when it's powered by this than it does with something that I know can drive it properly. And that is because it's just doesn't have quite the amount of control to wring out that last bit of detail that helps that veil kind of go away. And so for those of you who think that the Sens are veiled in general, I'm saying that this has a veil above and beyond that what is normally in the Sennheiser sound. Not a ton, but enough to be noticeable and all that. So it's really not a high Z kind of option there. Now, let me come back to what I think is the single biggest drawback of this piece then, and I mentioned it when I did that overhead build and features clip here, and that is that there is no volume control on this device itself. So you have to use whatever software is coming from your source device. You have to use the software volume control in there. To me, that is a problem for two, maybe three, to call it 2.5 reasons, if you will. For one, those software digital volume controls, they're getting better, of course. Like as time goes on, they improve on this, but they are changing the shape of the waveform that reaches your ear. Like because they are changing the wave and all that to reduce its amplitude, you don't get quite as much resolution. So using a software volume control and backing down the volume anywhere below 100 is sacrificing sound quality just a little bit. So I would prefer that to not be a case on what is supposedly an audiophile device. Now, this is not the only little mobile DAC amp that does not have a volume control on it, but the fact that this does not have one is something that you do need to take into account if you are in the market for something like this. The other reason that is a problem, and I noticed this particularly on my smartphone here, the S22 Plus, is that the volume adjustment, so the size of the adjustment, you hit the volume plus or the volume minus button on the smartphone, it's a pretty big jump either way, and so you lose a lot of the ability to really dial in a comfortable volume level that is loud enough to be fun and engaging, but also not going to be fatiguing or damaging to hearing at all. And so with several different headphones and IEMs, what I would notice is that there would be, just a little bit too quiet, and then I'd hit volume up on the phone, one more notch, and then it'd just be bam, blaringly loud. There was a particular moment with the G8, the Kennerton Yallerhorn GH40 on there, where it really jumped up big and just like got very painful really quick, because there was also just a big loud hit in the music the instant that I did that. So that is something to keep in mind there as well on that one. Now, you do get more volume steps and more volume control if you source this from a computer, like with Audirvana on my Surface Pro 4. I could use the mouse to drag the volume like into the output level through Audirvana there and like really get it dialed into where I wanted it, but that's also inconvenient. If you're doing any kind of multitasking, you've got to go back to that Audirvana window and drag that. Because for whatever reason on my Surface Pro 4, when I select this as the audio device, the up and down volume buttons on the device itself, on the Surface Pro 4 itself, don't control the volume anymore, because Audirvana has taken over that function because it does an exclusive output and all of that. So it becomes inconvenient then. It's just like, you can't even use the keyboard shortcuts. You have to actually go to the software player itself, find its output level, drag it with the mouse, and all that to get it to change the volume. So is that a separate issue than the other two that I just mentioned? I don't know. So that's why I said, 2, maybe 3, call it 2.5 reasons why not having its own volume control can be an issue. So in a vacuum here, the sound on here is pretty good. It does a really good job of powering and controlling moderately difficult to drive headphones, full-size headphones, but the lack of a volume control on this is a bit of an issue, I think. So the best device that I have on hand to compare this thing with is a product I reviewed a few months ago now, and that is the little iFi Uno. Also a little more of a transportable than an OTG kind of DAC amp. All of that. The Uno here is going to beat this one for features. In terms of what they can decode, very similar, although this one offers MQA, which I don't think matters anymore. But it can do it if that is still of interest to you. This one has more features from the standpoint of it does have its own volume control on it. It has a bass, it has like 3 EQ, actually 4 EQ presets when you consider you can have any one of these preset buttons on or none. So there's basically 4 EQ settings. So like, what is the bass sound signature of this? Like, a little bit difficult to say because you can change the sound intentionally on it. And then we have like just the 4.4 millimeter output right here on this one. But we also have a preamp output on the back. Like, this is connected to the volume control here, so you can run this into an outboard amplifier and all of that kind of well. So in terms of bells and whistles kind of features, the iFi is definitely ahead of the S9 Pro here. Okay, in terms of other ergonomics and like use cases, this is a much more capable OTG device because this is just a little bit too big for OTG. It's really more of a transportable. You put it in your laptop bag and wherever you set up to work with your laptop, you pull it out, plug it in, and off you go. The S9 Pro here is better at handling moderately difficult full-size headphones as well. It has a more power output. So even though it's much smaller, it puts out more power on this. And that is especially true like when you use one of the EQs on this that brings up the bass, like that really comes out even more because this thing runs out of gas driving things like the Hi-Fi-Man HE400 SE or that Edition XS, especially if you put that bass boost on. This one doesn't. It handles headphones like that just fine. So that to me is a key difference. I don't really want to do the ins and outs of just the finest minute details of the sonic differences, especially since this one has 4 different sounds. Okay, but like the key differences are just like in the features, the use cases, and then the ability to drive headphones, which this one does better. Okay, and noticeably so. All right, so all in all, like, would I recommend the S9 Pro? If you can handle the lack of a dedicated volume control on it, then sure. If you're in a situation where you're comfortable with that and that's not going to bother you, then great. But for me, I wouldn't buy one because of the lack of that feature, even though it does sound pretty decently good for the price and does a remarkably good job of powering moderately difficult to drive full-size headphones for its price and its form factor. So a little bit of a mixed bag for me, but I will leave it to you, the potential buyer, to decide whether that trade-off is worth it. But thanks for watching. I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the Hidizs S9 Pro. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment down below if you haven't, and check out my PayPal and my Patreon, and generally do those things you do to support YouTube channels. So, as always, thanks for watching and enjoy the music.